Welcome everyone to Daf Yomi 1 week at a time, and welcome to Masechet Taanit. So welcome any newcomers that we have, and welcome back everybody who's been learning with us for a while now. Just an introduction to Masechet Taanit. Masechet Taanit, as you can see actually on the slide, is about rain. Oh, okay, hold on. Can you hear me? You can still hear me? Okay, great. So it's important to understand the. Oh, wait, I just lost the ability to record, Ezra. I don't know what happened, but I'm just going to keep talking. Um, okay, so it's important to understand the function of rain in Israel. I think anybody who has lived outside of Israel, we kind of see rain as maybe annoying. It's cold, it's wet, we don't love it. In Israel, it is extremely important for it to rain. We have a rainy season, which we'll talk about now at the beginning of this Masechet. And that season, it must rain because if not, the crops are not going to grow. The crops are very dependent on rain. This is not like places that have their own irrigation, countries that have rivers. Think about this. America has all these rivers. America does have the Jordan River, but it still is supplied by rainwater. So rain is extremely important. That's number one. When it doesn't rain, we have a tradition that we should fast. Hence, the name of our Masechet is Ta'anit. Ta'anit means to fast. There is an intrinsic connection between rain and our religious level or our connection to God. And therefore, as Jews, we see that if it doesn't rain, it actually means that we need to pray, we need to repent. And part of that, so we're going to talk about the prayer. And then later on in the Masechet, we're going to see when prayer isn't enough, we are going to institute fast days. And it's not just one, we'll see later on, it will actually be a series of fasts. Because it is extremely important for us to have that rain. And unfortunately, a few years ago in Israel, we actually had, I wouldn't call it a drought, but it was a very, very bad winter. It didn't rain, and it got very serious that there were several people who fasted. There were some communal prayers at the Kotel. Um, and actually, the following year, eventually it did rain a little bit. It was just a very dry winter. The following year was such a wet winter that we're actually, we'll see in today's shiur, we actually said a special blessing, thanking God for all the rain that we received that year. So it was a very stark contrast from one year to the next. So Be'ezrat Hashem, this year should be a rainy year. It's actually raining outside right now. So in that spirit, let's start Masechet Taanit. As always, we start on Daf 2, Bet. Remind us that there is no beginning and end to our learning. So we start on Daf Bet. Okay, and one more word of introduction. In our silent Amida, in our prayer that we pray every day, we mention rain twice. And the Mishna is going to explain to us the difference between the two. So the first one is in the second blessing. Again, the Amida is also called Shmona Esrei. It's 18 blessings. Really, it's 19 because one was added later on. In the second blessing, we add what's called the prayer Moshiv Haruach Umorid Hagashem, right? That God should bring the wind and the rain should fall. We are going to understand that this blessing or this prayer is about remembering that God controls the rain. And then later on, in the blessing of, it's called the blessing of the years, Barech Aleinu et Hashana Hazot, when we talk about getting, when we talk about having enough money to support ourselves, in that blessing we add the Tain tal umatar, right? God should bring, please God, bring the rain. And the Gemara is going to say that this prayer is asking for rain. So even though we mention rain twice, the Mishnah in a minute is going to distinguish between the two, differentiate. The first one is remembering that God brings rain. The second one is asking for bringing rain. And this, it's actually perfect because we're actually in the winter months, and we did recently start saying these blessings. Interestingly enough, not at the same time, and we're going to understand why that is. So let's begin. The Mishnah tells us that we need to add, as I mentioned, Moshiv Har. Oh, wait, sorry, I lost being the host, and now I can't share my pictures. So, Ezra, can you put me back as the host? I hope you're there, Ezra. Okay.
1 second. Which one?
I'm the one. I'm the
Okay.
one that's talking. You can see the other one is muted, so I'm the one. So if you could just make me host.
Okay. Is that better?
Yes, thank you so much. Let me
Okay.
just make sure my pictures are. No, my pictures are not here. Did I upload them again? Oh no.
I see the
Oh,
banner.
Tamar, stop sharing content as soon as you stop.
1 second. Maybe not presenter. 1 second. Hold on. Hold on.
Okay.
1 second. I'm gonna take back
Okay.
calls for a second.
Okay,
Here.
I'm gonna keep talking, and then you just let me know when I.
That's how I feel all the time.
We have to go with the flow. Okay, I'm gonna keep talking. So um, as I mentioned, we start to say Moshiv Haruach Umorid Hagashem, and now the Mishnah gives us a number of different opinions as to when we start saying, oh, now I can do it. Okay, thank you. Okay, when do we start saying Moshiv Haruach Umorid Hagashem? First of all, I just want to thank Rabbi Natan Farber from Styladaf. He's back and he started making these slides. So um, the first opinion is that we start on the first day of Sukkot. That's the first one on the right. Rabbi Eliezer says we do it on the first day. The next option is that we do it on the last day. Again, it's connected to our lulav. You can see here it says we mention rain when we pick up the lulav, or the option is when we put down the lulav. That's when we mention rain. But then the Mishnah says, wait a minute, but it's a bad omen if it rains on Sukkot. So how can we start asking for rain on the first day of Sukkot? So the Mishnah quickly explains to us that we're not asking for rain when we say Moshiv Haruach. We're just mentioning the fact that God is in charge of the rain. And then the Mishnah says, well, if that's the case, why don't we say it all year round? God is in charge of rain all year round. So we say no. Again, in Israel, it's important to understand that it only rains in the rainy season. It doesn't rain the rest of the time, and therefore we don't say Moshiv Haruach when it's not raining. We see here there are two more opinions. One is on the second day of Sukkot, and this is connected to Nisuch Hamayim. We learned about this, the libations of the water on the altar, which starts on the second day of Sukkot. Another opinion is on the sixth day, and this is we'll see in a minute, a little bit later on in the Gemara, how this is connected to the libation. So let's continue in the Mishnah on Daf 2. As we know, that the Chazan, the leader of the prayer, on the last day of Sukkot, in Shacharit, in the first prayer, he does not say Moshiv Haruach. Only the Chazan of Musaf, right, the second prayer, he does mention it, and the reverse is for Pesach, right? Again, we're going to go back and forth. On Sukkot, we start saying Moshiv Haruach. On Pesach, we stop saying it. So the Mishnah tells us that on Pesach, the Chazan does say Moshiv Haruach for Shacharit in the morning, and then Musaf for the additional prayer, he then stops saying it. So we see that the change is always done during Musaf. Um, Okay, let's go to the Gemara. So the Gemara says that we learned in Masechet Brachot that we mention rain in the second blessing. The second blessing is called Gvura. It's about God's mighty deeds. And therefore, in that, right, one of God's mighty deeds is that he brings the rain. And then we ask for rain, as I mentioned before, in what's called Birkat HaShanim, when we talk about having a good year. We learned in Masechet Rosh Hashanah that we're judged, right? We just did this in the last Masechet, that we're judged for water on Sukkot, right? Therefore, we're going to start to say Moshiv HaRuach at the end of Sukkot, and that's when we start. And again, as I said, right, the mighty deeds of God is that he brings rain into this world. And the same thing, right? We need to ask for this in our silent prayer. For here, since we're talking about God's mighty deeds, interestingly enough, the Gemara tells us that there are three keys that God keeps, and He doesn't give it to anybody else. Right. So here you can see kind of the keyhole. I like this very much. The first is the key to rain. The second is the key to childbirth. And the third is the key to Tchiyat HaMetim, to the resurrection of the dead. And these all, right, it says that God holds the key and he opens these things for us. They all have, in the verse that mentions each one of these things, talks about God opening, right? Opening the skies, opening the womb, opening the ground, and that lets these things come out. And that's interesting. The Gemara adds also the key to parnasa, to income or sustenance, right? That God controls how much we get, right? Because we say, Poteach et yadecha umasbia l'chol chai ratzon. God opens up his hands and gives out food to everybody who needs it. Okay, again, as I mentioned, now the Gemara talks about why each day is the beginning for Moshiv Haruach, right? Why is it the first day? Maybe, even though just to remind us, the halacha is, the law is that we ask on the last day, right? On the last day is when we add Moshiv Haruach. Not on the first day. But here, the Gemara asks, why would we do it on the first day? Right? Again, as we said, it's connected to the lulav. The lulav and the etrog symbolize water, and we pick it up on the first day. Therefore, we should also ask for or mention rain on the first day. Okay. The next is... hold on one second. Okay, and then as I said, right, we're going to mention rain on the first day. Again, the law is only on the last day. Then we said maybe we start saying it on the second day or the sixth day. Why is that? Again, it's connected to when we pour the water libation, the nisuch hamayim, on the altar, which starts on the second day and goes through Sukkot. Okay, the Daf 3, Daf Gimel, talks about, again, as we mentioned, the Nisuch HaMayim is all throughout Sukkot. So the question is, why are we specifically talking about the second day? And then the Gemara says, you're right, it's based on a verse, not because of the water libation. And then we have... Okay, so now the Gemara says that we don't really need to mention the tal, right? 10 tal, morid hatal, right? We say in Israel, I think in America they don't say it actually. In the summer months, we say morid hatal instead of moshiv haruach. Right, so we talk about the dew that comes down. So the Gemara tells us you don't really have to mention the dew or the winds because God never withholds these things for us. Right. What's interesting is dew is something that falls every single day, and here the Gemara talks about different verses. Again, as I mentioned in the introduction, rain is very I would say, sensitive to our religious or spiritual level. But dew, right, the dew that comes every day, that is something that God will never stop, right? And here on Daf 3, God promises that the Gemara mentions the verses that talk about God promising that there will always be dew on the ground. And the Gemara mentions a story with Eliyahu Hanavi, right? Elijah the prophet, how he said he was going to stop the dew. And the Gemara says, wait, how can he stop the dew? We just said that God never stops the dew. And then the Gemara says, no, no, no. There are two types of dew. There's dew that's regular, that never stops, but a dew that is blessed dew, right? Tal of bracha, that he could stop. And he did have power, I guess, to stop it. And also the four winds, right? We talk about the four winds. That's what brings the rain. But here the Gemara says that these four winds always exist, right? And it's compared to the Jewish people, right? The Jewish people are spread into the four winds, right, in all four directions. And just like the world can't function without these four winds, so too the world cannot function without the Jewish people, right? There's this connection between the winds and the Jewish people. Okay, let's go back now. The Gemara says that if you didn't say Moshiv Haruach in the second blessing, you have to go back and say it again. That's how important it is that you have to say it. But if you didn't say about Tal in the summer, you do not have to go back again because it is less important, which is interesting. And here, the rest of the Daf 3, the Gemara talks about early clouds before the rain won't be stopped, but the clouds after the rain will, and about regular winds, which again, regular winds never stop, but stormy winds can stop, right? Again, I think here we've made some very bold statements of winds never stops, but we know that sometimes it's not windy. So how does that work, right? So I think the Gemara is trying to say, oh, there's always like a breeze in the air, but stormy winds that can be started or stopped. And here the Gemara talks about when is rain good and when is rain not good. Again, we were talking about rain being positive, but it's not always, right? So the Gemara talks about that, if there's the wind after the rain, that's good. And if there's too much wind afterwards, it's not good. If there's too much sun, it's not good. Snow is very good for the mountains, and rain is very good for the valleys. And then at the top of Daf 4, right, the Gemara talks about, again, different types of rain, that there's heavy rain, which is good for the trees, and light rain, which is good for the seeds or everything else to grow. So if we have any farmers or people who like to grow things, I guess you'd really appreciate these dapim because it talks about what makes the seeds grow. And here, beautifully, in a very classic Gemara way, the Gemara says, oh, we're talking about seeds growing. So too, young students are like seeds, right? Young people who learn are like seeds because once they break through the surface, there's no stopping them, right? And I think that that's true for any student, right? Once we push ourselves as much as we can, then we can grow and grow and grow, and there's no stopping us. Also, right, the seeds need to be strong, like learned people, right? Learned people need to be strong. They need to be committed to their learning, just like all of you who have been learning for a long time now. By the way, I don't know if I mentioned this last week, but when we finished Masechet Rosh Hashanah, we finished 25% of the Talmud. So those of you who started in January almost 2 years ago, you have learned a quarter of the Talmud. So that is very, very exciting. So keep it going. Keep it up. Okay, so you need to be strong. But the Gemara tells us you also need to be calm. And you also need to be easygoing, as we saw at the beginning of this year. We need to be easygoing when things don't always work out the way we want them to. So, okay, so we need to be strong, easygoing, and calm. Okay, since we are talking about rain, the Gemara talks about three people who asked for things improperly, but God answered them in a proper way. So here we have three people. Again, we're going to start on the right. So all of them asked for something. So we have Eliezer, who was the servant of Abraham. Remember, he asks God for a sign. Oh, sorry, we're starting on the left side. He asks for a sign to know which girl is the proper girl to bring back for Yitzchak, right? He asked for a sign and he gets it. He was asked properly, and that was Rivka, who gave water to Eliezer, to the servant, and to all the flock. The next person is Shaul, who is the first king, and he said, whoever kills Goliath, the giant, I'll give my daughter Michal, I'll give her to him to marry, and he was answered properly, right? It was King David. And the third one is Yiftach. Yiftach, right, is the one. He was a general in the book of Judges, and he was a general. He wanted to be victorious, and he says, whatever comes out of my house first, I'll give as an offering, as a korban. He assumed, I don't know why, that some animal, a sheep, a goat, a cow, might come out of his house. Maybe that's something that used to come out of his house to greet him. Unfortunately, right here it says he was answered improperly, meaning it did not work out for him because unfortunately his daughter comes out of the house and now he didn't know what to do. Interestingly enough, the Navi does not give us an end of the story. It seems to imply that he does sacrifice her, though it is very important to understand, right, that God does not want human sacrifice. Right, we saw with Isaac, with Yitzchak in Akedat Yitzchak, he does not want human sacrifice. So there is an opinion that he actually does sacrifice her. There is another opinion that he kind of locks her away, and that's like sacrificing her, but he doesn't actually kill her. It is not clear. But the bottom line is these people did not ask properly. Again, this is brought here because we are going to be asking for rain. So we need to make sure that we're asking properly, again, being the right time, the right way, and therefore we should just ask. We should ask properly as well. Okay, so we talked about when do we start asking for rain? When do we finish? When do we stop asking for rain? So the Gemara says we stop after Pesach, or maybe after the month of Nisan. And it's different, right, again, between asking and mentioning. But then the Gemara says, well, if you're asking for rain, you should mention rain. And therefore, actually, when we stop it all together. Moshiv Haruach and V'tein Talu Matar stop all together. We'll see later on why they're not asked at the same time, but over Sukkot. But for Pesach they are. And again, we said, when do we do this? So we actually do it on the first day of Pesach. The first day of Pesach, that's when we stop saying a Moshiv Haruach. Or another opinion is that we stop after we brought the Korban Pesach, meaning on the 14th of Nisan, as opposed to on the 15th. And maybe we stop earlier. And then we say, no, right, we're going to stop on the first day of Pesach. When do we, now again, we talked about mentioning rain, Moshiv Haruach, on the last day of Sukkot. When do we start asking for rain? V'ten tal umatar. So we're going to have different opinions. One is on the 3rd of Cheshvan. The other is on the 7th. And that's when we ask for rain. But again, as we said, we mentioned the rain before. And the question is why, right? So we say that in Bavel, that's when they start asking for rain. Maybe in Israel, we start earlier. Again, what's the difference? That the produce in the field in Bavel needs to wait. It needs to wait for a longer time. There's also another opinion that the people needed to get back to their homes in Bavel, right, in Babylonia, and that took much longer. And that's why to this day, outside of Israel, you start saying V'tein talu matar on December 4th or 5th. You say it much later. In Israel, we start much earlier in Cheshvan, right? Because we need rain much earlier, and we need to start. We need to start earlier. The Gemara says that maybe that should only be during the time of the temple when people are coming to Jerusalem, right? But if there's no temple, maybe you start earlier. But the Gemara says, no, you're still going to start later. Okay. Hold on one second. All right, let's go again. Daf number 5. Hey, let's do the next Mishnah. So the next Mishnah tells us, till when do you ask for rain? As we mentioned previously, right? We ask till Pesach or maybe till after Nisan. And here the Mishnah tells us that you still need rain in Nisan, and maybe we should wait till the end of the month. From here, the Gemara tells us that there are two types of rain. We're going to talk about it in the next daf, but there's a rain called Yoreh, and there's a rain called Malkosh. We actually say this in Shema every day in the second paragraph. We talk about Yoreh uMalkosh, right? And these are two types of rain. We're going to talk about what each one is, but first we are going to learn a little bit about the Prophet Yoel. Actually, I have a nephew, Yoel. So Yoel was a prophet. His book is his book is very small, and therefore it's part of what's called Trei Asar, which is a book of 12 small prophets. It doesn't mean that they were small; it just means that their books are small. So the Gemara tells us a little bit about the prophet Yoel and what happened when he was the prophet. So it tells us that there were 7 years of famine. It was 7 years of famine, and then came locusts. And then the first rain came down in Nisan. And right, so you can see at the bottom, it talks about the beginning of rain, that it started in Nisan. All of this is coming to tell us that rain is good in Nisan. That's the reason we went on this tangent. But first, let's go a little bit more, right? So it says that it tells us in Yoel that it started to rain in the beginning of Nisan, and then they were told to go out and plant whatever grain that they had. And here is an excellent question, right? The people said, we have so little grain, right? What should we do? Should we eat it or should we plant it? And Yoel says that it's better to plant it than to eat it, right? And then a miracle occurred. And then, what happened? A miracle. So they planted it. A miracle occurred, and they found more grain, like in their walls. So they were able to eat something. And then it rains again, and then it somehow, right? You see here from the 5th to the 16th of Nisan, it miraculously grew, so that on the 16th of Nisan, they were able to bring the Omer sacrifice, right? We learned it in Masechet Psachim about the Korban Omer, the sacrifice of the sheaves of barley. You can see on the bottom, and that's why we start counting, right, Sfirat HaOmer, right? So here, miraculously, it all grew in a few days. It actually grew in like 11 days. I skipped the top, but the top talks about how bad the famine was. It talks about what they ate throughout the 7 years of famine. It gets pretty bad, but right, they eat what was around, then they ate what they could find, and then animals, and then whatever animals and creepy crawly things they could find. And then it says here in the 6th year they ate their children, in the 7th year they ate their own flesh. I'm not sure how literal this is, but definitely the idea is that it was a really bad famine. But then miraculously, as we just mentioned, the barley grows, and this is, the Gemara says, this is the I would say the fulfillment of the verse, right? Hazorim bidima berina yiktsoru, right? Those who sow the field in, right, with tears, right, in sorrow, right, will reap or harvest that grain with right, berina, right, with song. They will be happy. So they were definitely crying when they planted. They were definitely happy when they harvested. Um, the Gemara continues explaining the rest of this Tehillim, right, which is what we sing, Shir Hamalot, what we sing on Shabbat before we say Birkat Hamazon. So the Gemara here on Daf 5 goes through that whole chapter if you want to see how it is interpreted. But the idea is basically that everything grew so quickly and large, and it was perfect. And here again, the Gemara talks about the famine and how bad it was. Um, then we talk about rebuilding, right? Since that chapter in Tehillim talks about rebuilding Jerusalem, so the Gemara tells us that God doesn't build or doesn't go into Jerusalem in heaven, right? It's called Jerusalem Shel Mala, till we rebuild the Jerusalem Shel Mata, right? This idea that there is a parallel Jerusalem in heaven that parallels the physical one down on earth, and that they're linked, right? And God is only in the Jerusalem in heaven only when we're in the temple in Jerusalem down on earth. Okay, and from here, God talks. The Gemara talks a little bit about worshiping idols and how it's so terrible that people abandon God and worship idols, and it leads people to hell. So that would be pretty bad. Okay, 1 second. Okay, here Shmuel Hanavi. Oh, here we're talking about Shmuel Hanavi on Daf 5, and how he would write Samuel, and how he was 52 years old when he died, and it seems that like old age jumped upon him, says the Gemara, and it says that he's compared to Moshe Aharon, right? We actually say this in Kabbalat Shabbat on Friday night, right? Moshe Aharon Ushmuel, right? Shmuel, right? So it's in Kabbalat Shabbat. We talk about Moshe, Aaron, and Shmuel, right? Again, Shmuel, Samuel is the one who anoints Shaul, Saul, and David, and it seems that he needed to die at a certain point so that David can become king. And the Gemara talks about this idea that God decrees that Shmuel should die young because of David and Shaul. Interestingly, since we're talking about people dying, the Gemara tells us that Yaakov, on the other hand, never dies. That Yaakov doesn't die based on a verse. It seems that I don't know where he goes, but it seems that he doesn't die. And from here, the Gemara talks about a very, I should have linked my friends. Okay, there's a beautiful blessing that says Ilan Ilan b'me avarecha, right? Oh, tree, how can I bless you? And it's based on this Gemara that basically someone asked for a blessing and said, right, and then the response was, how can we bless you? You have everything, right? And he says, oh, I'll give you a mashal, right? It says here, right, I'll give you an allegory to how one can bless someone who seemingly has everything, right? He says that, right, you can have a tree who, right, there's a man who came across a tree in the desert, and he says, right, the fruit is sweet, and the shade, right, there's shade and is pleasant, and there's a stream beneath it. And then he said, right, how can I bless you with the tree? So he says, may all your saplings be just like you, right? And this idea of when people seem to have everything now, the blessing for them would be to have everything in the future, right? May your descendants be as blessed as you. And I actually, I'll put in a plug for my friend Marcy Wiesel. She does beautiful paper cuts. She has a website called Paper Cut Judaica, and she has a beautiful paper cut of a tree, really like this, a tree with fruit beside a river. And the idea is, right, it's a beautiful piece, let's say, to give to grandparents, right? To say that your grandchildren should follow in your path, in your right, it should be like you. So that's I just think a beautiful blessing. Okay, daf 6, the last daf that we're going to do together for today. As we mentioned before, we have the idea of yore, which is one type of rain. And it says that for yore, it means that why is it called yore? It teaches that people need to go and fix their roof and prepare for the winter, right? Or again, literally, or it's the rain that saturates the ground. The yore is the first rain of the season. Or it's because it comes down softly, or the opposite, maybe because it comes down very hard. And then we said again, if it comes down hard, it has to be for a blessing. Malkosh is the next rain, and that is also for bracha, for blessing. These are all good rain. So now the Gemara discusses when do we have these rains. So the Gemara says that Yoreh comes down in Cheshvan. Again, Cheshvan being right after the Chagim, right? So I guess we were around October time. Right, Malkush is in Nisan, right? It's at the end. It comes at the end. Or maybe Yoreh is Tishrei, right? September time when the Chagim are. And Malkush is Iyar, right? Meaning afterwards. The Gemara says, no. Tishrei and Iyar are the wrong times. The right time is Cheshvan, Nisan, right? Again, Cheshvan being the beginning of the winter, Nisan being the end of the winter. And again, here the Gemara tells us that Malkush, people need to pray if it doesn't fall, and therefore that's how it got its name, or it falls on the stalks, and that's how it gets Malkush, the name Malkush. Here again, now we're going to talk about the rain. So it seems that there's a first rain, a second rain, and a third rain. These all seem to be in Cheshvan, and here the Gemara tells us maybe the first rain is on the 3rd of Cheshvan, which is why we start saying V'tein talu matar on the 3rd of Cheshvan. The second is on the 7th, and the third is on the 17th. So maybe that's that, or the 7th being the first, and then the 17th, and then the 23rd. You can see we're just kind of shifting it, or shift it more. The first one starts on the 17th of Cheshvan, the 23rd, and then Aleph Kislev. Right? The question was, is there good rain that happens in Kislev as well? So the Gemara says yes. And this is going to be important for later on when we learn about when do we start fasting, right? We know that it's important that it should rain. The question is, when is it supposed to be raining? And at what point do we say the rain is late? And therefore we need to start fasting. That's why all these dates are very important. So here the Gemara tells us that an individual doesn't fast till Kislev, right? Again, we're now in the month of Kislev. Or maybe till the 17th of Cheshvan, or again, we say, and then as I mentioned before, on the 3rd of Cheshvan is when we start saying 10 talu matar, or maybe on the 7th, again, not sure. Okay, we need to know when the middle rain is. The question is why. So I understand the first one because I need to know when to start saying 10 talu matar. I need to know the last one because if we've gotten to that last point and it hasn't rained once yet, that's already, we know we're in trouble. Why do I need to know when the middle rain is? So the Gemara says it's important to know about for vows. Remember we talked about if someone would say, I take a vow, I'm going to take a vow for, right, not to get benefit from you till the second rain. So we need to know when that is. Or maybe it has to do with when the poor people can start taking olives from the trees, and therefore you need to know when that middle time is. Or, says the Gemara, maybe it's about knowing when you can take a shortcut through the fields. that's only till the second rain, meaning, again, the fields are muddy and wet, but there's seeds in the field. And if you walk on it, it's not good for the seeds. So we have to know when is that time that things are going to start sprouting. So that is important. Okay. The Gemara talks about rain. The word is riviyah, and the question is, what does that mean? So riviyah, from like pru urevu, like to multiply. There's also this idea of like penetration, that the rain penetrates the ground, or the rain is the husband of the ground. It makes the ground grow. Interestingly, yeah, it's interesting if you think about, I don't want to, maybe I should mention it, but like Greek mythology, or right, paganism, right? The earth is very feminine, right? So interesting because it grows. Okay, anyway, it doesn't matter. Okay, so let's talk about, right, that first rain. It gets absorbed into the ground. The Gemara talks about it being absorbed 1 tefach, right? That's how much, right? Slowly the rainwater gets seeped into the ground. That first rain only goes a little bit into the ground. And here the Gemara starts talking about, when is it a good time for it to rain, like in the day. So it says that if it rains in the morning before we say Kriyat Shema, before we say Shema, so that's not beneficial rain, right? It's better if it starts a little bit later in the morning. Thick rains or thick rains are or thick clouds in the sky are beneficial, bring beneficial rain. Thin clouds, not so much. Right? And here the Gemara talks about, it's good if it doesn't rain in Tevet. Again, Tevet is around December, January. Or it says, no, it's good if it rains. So then Gemara says, wait a minute, is it good or is it not good? So it says, if it's good, if it doesn't rain in Tevet, only if it already rained in Cheshvan, meaning previously. But if it didn't rain yet, right, if it didn't rain October, November, so then it should rain in December, right? We'll take it when we can get it. The Gemara says sometimes it'll rain in one part of the city and not in another part of the city. That could seem that it's good, but it really seems to not be good. And here is, and we're going to end with this. Here is what the Gemara says, that when it rains a lot, right? We talked about, and we'll talk a lot about when it doesn't rain and what happens. But it's important to recognize that when it rains a lot, we should make a bracha, right? We should make a blessing. There's a special it's about, right? Modim anachnu lach, right? God, we are so thankful that you let it rain. And it says, right, if our mouths were filled with all the songs of praise, right, we still would not be able to praise you enough. If these words sound familiar, we actually say it on Shabbat. It's the prayer called Nishmat Kol Chai, and it talks about how God is so incredible that I can't even begin to, I mean, I can begin, but I can never completely thank him for all the amazing things that he does. And then we say, we finish it with Baruch Rov Lahodot, right? God, we are so thankful. And I thought that this was really great because next week is Thanksgiving. So you can see that really there is that concept of being thankful to God. Again, we are thankful. I think we're thankful every day in our daily prayers. Right? Interesting, and we'll finish with this, right? We wake up every morning, and the first thing we're supposed to say is Modeh ani lefanecha, right? God, I'm so grateful to you, right, that I was able to wake up. And then when we start our prayers, we say Modim anachnu lach, right? We are, again, very grateful. Interestingly, we start off saying it in a very personal way, Modeh ani, right, in the singular. When we get to the Amida, when we get to our silent prayer, we say Modim anachnu, right? In the morning when I wake up, I'm thinking about myself. I'm not necessarily thinking about other people, but once I got dressed and I start to pray, I should be thinking about my community, right? My family, my nation, right? And that is Modim Anachnu Lach. So Daf 6 ends with this idea of being thankful to God. When it rains, when we see that we are filled with blessings, we should be thankful to God. And we will pick this up next week and talking more about rain and the proper time for rain, and then what happens when it is not raining. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining me. And Be'ezrat Hashem, we will meet again next week. Thank you, everyone, for being flexible with your times, and we will. We will meet again next week. So wishing everyone a Shabbat Shalom. And again, thank you very much.
Thank you, Rabbi.